Spokane Valley could become a sanctuary city of a different
Councilman
kind.
Caleb Collier says that this
I'm proposing that the city of Spokane Valley issue a proclamation stating that our city is a Second Amendment sanctuary city.
Welcome to the fire.
Today on Church and State Business Reform with Dr. Jon Padfield. Hello, Christian Patriots, and welcome to Church and State, where we drive morality and religion over tolerance and apathy. And I'm your host, Caleb Collier, once again, your favorite far-right shock jock, and the show that talks about politics and religion. Jesus Christ is our referee, so it's always nice and clean. Real quick, point you to the website, churchandstate.media. Fill out that form. You're going to get our newsletter and, of course, a personal phone call from your host. While you're there, check out our most recent episodes, continuing to bring on really interesting guests and have conversations that you're probably not hearing many other locations. Also, check out the featured guests. We've had some who's who over the years, incredible people that have joined us. And with all of those, you can just click on the name and watch that episode. Also, check out the great affiliates that we have. These are companies that I support, personally shop with. With all of them, you use that promo code Church and State, and you'll be helping to support us. And speaking of support, we do need help, ladies and gentlemen. We're already part of some great networks like NRBTV and Prepper Broadcasting Network and a whole slew of other ones. We're looking to expand. Well, we are expanding. Mid-August, we will be nationally syndicated through AM/FM radio, and that takes money, ladies and gentlemen. So for all of you, if you can even pledge something as small as $5 a month, it really does help us keep the lights on. Lastly, if you want to get a hold of us, Church and State 1776 at proton.me. With that, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. I'm pleased to bring to you Dr. Jon Padfield. He's an engineer turned state legislator turned business professor. He's been an electrical engineer, an Indiana state representative twice, 1994 and 1996, and did not decide to run for a third term, and is now a business professor, consultant, and keynote speaker. And he also just officiated his first wedding here. So, Jon, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Caleb, thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, as do I. Just to start doing a little bit of a background here, electrical engineer to a politician is a really interesting career move.
Yeah, I graduated from Purdue in 1988, went straight to work for General Motors, and shortly into my career, GM asked me to move to New York State. I was working in Lockport, New York, just outside of Buffalo. I lived up there in 1990, and when I moved back to Indiana in 1991, that is really what got me politically active. I did not want Indiana becoming like New York. I had this naive, being born and raised in Indiana, I had this naive view that the whole country was like Indiana, and that 1 year in New York really opened my eyes and started getting me politically active to realize that state leadership has a tremendous impact on people's lives, and that's what eventually led me to run for office. I ran in '92 as a libertarian. I think I set the record that still stands to this day, 17% of the vote for state office as a libertarian. But in 1994, I ran as a Republican, won the seat, and ran again in '96, won re-election, and chose not to run in 1998.
Sure, and I can definitely respect that. People who watch the show know I'm a very outspoken libertarian, a Christian libertarian, and as a former politician as well, I definitely held to that, the Constitution, and libertarianism. But unfortunately, in this country, there's definitely that two-party system that our founding fathers warned us against. But definitely libertarians are going to be on that side of very limited government and personal freedom. And I think that's something that we should definitely go back to as a country.
100% agree. The symbol that I have over here, the Statue of Liberty, that's the closest thing I have to a political symbol in my office. Just for anyone watching, on this side I have Athena, Greek goddess of wisdom and war, and not that I'm into pagan religions, but I always was fascinated by mythology, and one of the things that really captured my attention, the goddess of wisdom and war was the same entity. But I view these two statues, liberty and a constant reminder about it takes wisdom and, unfortunately, sometimes action to protect liberty.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, we just celebrated 250 years as a republic. I always want to remind people that we are a republic versus a democracy. But
Yes.
we're seeing a lot of cracks in the system. I would say some very deep issues, and I would submit to you that we're actually operating more like an empire than we are as a republic.
One of my most recent videos out on my YouTube channel, YouTube/@businessreform, but one of my most recent videos was a deep dive on the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. I posted this just a few days before the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration. And in the preamble, Jefferson wrote most of it, but it was Dr. Benjamin Franklin who contributed the phrase self-evident, which is a mathematical term, and it means this is so obvious I don't have to go into any more detail to explain it. And the self-evident truths that are held in the preamble, one of them is to secure these rights, right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So there is our purpose of government. Number one, purpose of government, to secure our rights. Number two, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This was a self-evident truth, so elemental, so fundamental that it doesn't need any more explanation. And then the Declaration goes on saying, when government is operating without the consent of the governed, which is basically what they are saying to the king, we are not giving our consent to what you're doing. And when a government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to throw off that form of government and to come up with something new to protect their liberties. And I stressed in my video, I'm not saying we're at that point yet, but we are certainly moving in that direction. You look at all of the flock cameras that are going up nationwide and people showing up at city and county council meetings saying, we don't want these. Shut up, little citizen, go home. We know better than you. We're putting them up anyway. And it's 10 times worse when it comes to data centers. When there was Festus, Missouri, they had to move the city, I can't remember if it was city or county council, I think it was city council. They had to move the city council meeting to a high school gymnasium because there were hundreds of people that wanted to come out. And for 2 solid hours, person after person got up to say how opposed they were to the data center going into Festus. And then the city council voted 6-2 in order to approve it, and over everyone's objection. The happy ending to that story is 2 weeks later were the primaries, and every city council member that was on the ballot was voted out. So there was the governed taking making their voices heard and firing half of the city council that were on the ballot 2 weeks later.
Yeah, I absolutely love that story, and it shows that there is still power with the people in this great country. I love what you were talking about. I tell people all the time, when a politician knocks on your door and they're running for office, that the first question you should ask them is, what is the purpose of government? And you nailed it, because why? Because it's easy, because it's written in our founding document. It's to secure rights. But when you ask a politician this, you get a whole slew of different answers, kind of goofy stuff, depending on where they run. Sometimes you get somebody that's actually a socialist, and they'll give you a whole bunch of answers about what government should be doing. But it's just that simple, ladies and gentlemen, to secure our rights. And one of the things that I also wanted to point out, you read through the 27 grievances that they list out in the Declaration of Independence, and I challenge the audience, print this out for yourself and put a check mark on every single one of what our current system is doing. I think you're going to be a little bit surprised at how many of those exist actually in worse form than they did when we rebelled against England.
What was the tax on tea in 1776?
Right.
And compare that to what we're paying today, and yes, wars have been fought over less than what's going on right now.
Yeah, most certainly. And, one of the ones that stands out to me is this, it talks about that there's that they've enacted all these different officials to eat out our substance, right? To harass us and eat out our substance. I just flew. I was in Vegas for the Red Pill Expo and Freedom Fest. And every time I go through the TSA lines, I'm like, well, here we go again. Here's this government entity to harass me and eat out of my substance.
Let's see, this is July. The last 2 months have been such a blur. I've been traveling all over. But about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. While I was there for a Brushfires of Freedom tour event, I had the opportunity to interview Lauren Rodriguez. Lauren's husband, Keone, was arrested. And to say he was arrested is an understatement. She did an interview with me, and she described before the sun broke the horizon, they heard something out on the front lawn. It was an armored car, an MRAP, mine-resistant anti-mine vehicle. But the FBI drove an MRAP onto their front lawn. They had drones in the air. And between 40 and 50 heavily armed FBI agents broke into their house, pulled them out of bed, dragged them outside of their house. She was talking about being in handcuffs and pushed through the front door of her house and looking down and seeing 6 laser dots on her chest. And her husband, Keone, is who they were after. He was accused of writing privacy software. No history of violence whatsoever, no criminal record whatsoever. The worst thing this man's ever had in his life was a speeding ticket. And they had to send between 40 and 50 heavily armed agents with an armored vehicle because he may have broken a law related to software. And he ended up pleading guilty and accepting a 5-year sentence because they were threatening him with a 20-year sentence. And there were enough warning signs about the entire system being rigged that he thought it was in his best interest to take the guaranteed 5 rather than gambling with an additional 20 if he didn't take a plea deal. But the whole point is, sending forth that swarm of agents, that is, I don't know anything to call it other than an abuse of power. This is not about officer safety when you send that many people in. In fact, I would argue just the opposite. You take 40 to 50 people with automatic weapons and send them into one room together. That is probably a lot more dangerous than sending in 2 or 3 heavily armed people. So officer safety is an absolute joke when you start putting that many people with that type of armament and sending them into one room while it's still dark outside.
You're absolutely right. The story infuriates me. And just knowing myself, I served in the United States Marine Corps. I have firearms. If somebody breaks into my house early morning, I'm going to grab my gun. This is why we have warrants. This is why the police have to go to a judge to go get a warrant, and you knock on the door like a civilized human being and you say, we have a warrant for your arrest. Most people, most law-abiding citizens are going to say, okay, this is clearly an error, but let's go figure this out. But instead, they're treating us all like criminals, to where we do these no-knock warrants and they raid our homes with military vehicles and military equipment and arrest us for something like privacy software.
Well, earlier this year, that happened late last year. Earlier this year, Derek Bros, myself, and several other people spoke at Monerotopia in Mexico City. This is a cryptocurrency/privacy 4-day event. I was one of the speakers. The first day of the event, I believe he was the second speaker that morning, an American citizen. His name escapes me off the top of my head, but he lives in New York. American citizen who had flown down to Mexico City. Just as he was finishing his presentation and starting to step off stage, he was swarmed by 20 Mexican federales who arrested him in front of the entire audience. As soon as he was taken into custody, he was put on a plane, flown back to Los Angeles, where he was met by federal marshals at the Los Angeles airport, taken to the FBI field office where he was held, and then eventually released. Here's my question. The FBI wanted him. He had to purchase a plane ticket. It's not like they didn't know where he was. They knew to have the Mexican police pick him up in Mexico City. The warrant that they arrested him on in February had actually been issued in December. So they could have picked him up any time over a 2-month window. Okay, what's the number one thing in the country today? Officer safety. Forget the Constitution. Officer safety is the most important thing in the world. So with that in mind, if you wanted to arrest someone and you wanted to do it with the absolute minimum risk to officers, where would you arrest him? How about after he goes through the metal detector at the airport? Why would you let him fly to a foreign country, let him get loose in the city where he could have gotten a weapon? Now, again, he has no history of violence, but if you're worried about officer safety, pick him up in the airport after he's gone through the metal detector. That is the safest place on earth to pick him up. But instead, you let him fly to another country, let him loose in Mexico City for a day, and then pick him up. Now, there's the potential he could have been armed at that point. This is not about officer safety. And again, no history of violence. Why did you need to send 20 officers to arrest him? Because they were trying to intimidate people like me. And I got news for them. It did just the opposite. I don't intimidate. There's an old expression, danger is real, fear is a choice. And I choose not to be afraid.
Well said there. And the government has such a long history of doing things like this. As you were speaking, I was reminded of, recent events, what happened with the Bundys in Nevada and Oregon, or in Texas with the Branch Davidians, with David Koresh, who it was not a good man, not a good man, but he jogged every single day through the town there, through Waco, and they could have arrested him then. Instead, they made a big scene of it under Janet Reno and Bill Clinton, and ultimately resulted in the deaths of a lot of innocent people, to be flat out, just to be open about it.
Do you recall the name of the operation to raid him at the Davidian quote-unquote compound? I don't know of many compounds that are made out of plywood, but that's how they referred to it, the Davidian compound. But do you happen to recall the name of the operation to go get him at his home?
It's
Operation
escaping.
Showboat.
Oh my gosh! Of course.
Operation Showboat. Wow, that's not telling.
So here we are. We have this. It's been happening for years and years and years. All it takes is the people to remember that we have God-given rights, as you said in the beginning of the episode. These self-evident rights that God gave us. Take them back, ladies and gentlemen. Start living like free men and free women, and remind the government that they work for us, that we don't work for them.
When I was in the General Assembly in Indiana, there's a lot of boring things that happen. Every now and then there's some fireworks, and that's what the media focuses on. But I will never forget being at the the microphone at the front of the House. And I made a comment about it was the states that created the federal government. And one of my colleagues got up to correct me. No, I'm wrong. It was the federal government that created the states. I'm speechless. I'm pretty sure there were 13 states that voted on ratifying the U.S. Constitution that formed the United States. Why did it have to be ratified by the states if the federal government created the states? I don't think that individual knew anything about Articles of Confederacy. I don't think he knew anything about American history. But no, I was correct in what I said. The states created the federal government. The federal government seems to have forgotten that. The states, in large part, seem to have forgotten that. But yeah, I really wish more people would study American history.
I would agree, and start operating under the 9th and 10th Amendments, which I would say are some of the most important amendments. And thank God for the Anti-Federalists for these Bill of Rights, because the Anti-Federalists were proven correct in their warnings. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Patrick Henry, one of my favorite leaders in the founding era, he argued against Virginia ratifying the U.S. Constitution. He wanted Virginia to stay out of the United States. And he made a series of very passionate speeches, and I have a copy of those speeches. It's a thin book, but it's an entire book of his speeches against joining the United States. And in his speeches, there's a couple of absolutely beautiful and eloquent quotes. As some people were talking about how much better this is going to be for trade because, as a nation, strength in numbers, we can negotiate better tariffs and we can do this and that. And Patrick Henry got up and said, you are not to inquire how your trade may be increased or how you should become a great and powerful people, but how your rights can be preserved. For liberty ought to be the direct end of your government. Patrick Henry nailed it. And he said, you're all over here debating about how good is this going to be for us financially. You're losing sight that the purpose of government is securing our rights. And then the following day, as the debates continued about whether Virginia is going to join the Union, and that's why it's called the United States. The states joined a union. And just as when hourly workers join a union, you are ceding some of your rights to the union to negotiate on your behalf. And that's a whole separate issue with individuals joining a union. That's a whole separate issue. But when the states join a union, they are surrendering some of their rights as states to the federal government so the federal government can act on behalf of all of the states in the union. But the second day when Patrick Henry got back up to speak, he made the statement, guard the public liberty, suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will protect it but downright force. When you lose that force, you are inevitably ruined. And so I use this analogy. If you're home in bed, asleep, it's 2 a.m., and you hear somebody rattling the back door of your house, you don't just roll over and say, it'll be fine. I'm sure I have it locked. I'm just going to go back to sleep. No, you guard you guard that precious jewel. Suspect everyone that approaches it. And if someone's trying to open my door at 2 a.m., I'm going to suspect them. I'm not just going to say, it'll be okay. That's the attitude we're supposed to have with our rights. The whole issue that's come up recently with flock cameras and Leonardo's signal trace and all these other surveillance technologies that most people don't know about, but they're going to hear about them if they come out to my public speaking events. I go over a number of different technologies that are already being used. The smart street lights that are being put up in many cities, especially in California. But Patrick Henry said, suspect anyone that approaches your liberty. And that's what I look at all of these big tech companies. They are approaching my rights. They are approaching my liberty. And I'm not just going to say, well, I'm sure they have good intent. Oh, this is just going to be used against the bad guys. No. They are approaching my rights. I am going to defend my rights.
Hey, man, I couldn't have said that better myself. And I've spoken a number of times at other events about this very issue, about digital privacy. And one of the things I use is actually the Third Amendment. And, nobody talks about the Third Amendment, but it's the courting of soldiers, right? And this is a big deal during the Revolution. I submit to people that this is the new soldier. This is the digital soldier, what I'm holding in my hand, your phone. And you don't have to quarter that in your home. So start operating and exercising your rights as American citizens. We don't have a country, or we weren't supposed to have a country, that spied on its own citizens. And yet here we are with Flock and Signal Trace and Palantir, these big tech corporations that view us as the enemy, view us with suspicion. It's time to replace them all.
I would agree.
All right, so let's transition here, and I'm going to bring up where you're speaking because I want people to go here, but I want to talk about what we can do here. I want to talk about signal trace and flock cameras. And there's been a massive movement of people that are very upset. And I love seeing that. There's massive protests going on. In fact, there's going to be a protest, I believe, this weekend nationwide against all of these data centers that are coming up. People are waking up. They don't want to live in 1984.
It's interesting. The data centers, we go through phases where there's a different bad guy. I go all the way back to the I was born in '66, so I don't remember the hippie movement much. I was too young. But for a while it was don't pick up hitchhikers. The hippies are the danger to the country. And then you get into the 80s, and it's the drug dealers are the real threat to the country. And then you get into the 1990s. No, it's the Middle Eastern terrorists that are the threat to our country. And today, now it's we have to give up all online anonymity to protect the children. And this one grates on me like fingernails on a chalkboard. For a bunch of politicians to protect and hide records and cover up and allow cabinet members to lie under oath to the U.S. Senate about how well they knew a particular deceased individual who owned an island in the Caribbean. I only met him once. Never saw met him again? Nope. What about these pictures of you on his island? Oh, I forgot about that. For these people to cover up horrendous crimes that were committed against children, and then turn around in their next breath and say, you're going to have to use a photo ID, a government-issued photo ID to access the internet because we care about children. Bull. You absolutely do not care about children, or you would be doing something about the evidence that you have in your possession that you refuse to turn over because it's going to hurt somebody's friends.
You're absolutely right. And once again, going down your narrative, and I love that you went through these different eras. Look it up, ladies and gentlemen. The hippie movement and the spread of LSD. Guess who was responsible for that? The government. You want to talk about the 80s and all these drug dealers? You remember a little thing, the Iran-Contra scandal, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, what was going on there? The government was flying in all of this. You remember the brave journalist, Gary Webb, who was assassinated, who shot himself supposedly twice in the back of the head? Yeah, that's how people commit suicide. He revealed that the crack epidemic in L.A. was because of the government, the CIA, selling that crack to them. So yeah, all of this, as my guest just pointed out, when you're looking at that crisis, look to the government who engineered it because they want to engineer the solution.
There's a company called Despair.com. They make parodies of motivational posters, and they have a bunch of them. But one of my favorites, it's a poster that shows the U.S. Capitol building, and the text underneath the U.S. Capitol building says, if you think our problems are bad, just wait till you see our solutions.
I love that. Now, we're coming up on a hard break, but you're going to be in Spokane, Washington, August 1st. I want the audience to go over here. It's at Family of Faith Church, 1504 West Grace, August 1st. Doors open at 10 a.m. Our guest will be speaking at 10:30 to noon. So go check that out. Put that on your calendar, ladies and gentlemen. And my guest has agreed to do another 15 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I want all of you to be a walking billboard. Some of us don't have platforms such as Church and State, but you know what? We can wear t-shirts and engage in great conversations with Christians and patriots all across the country. Stand Up Now apparel is the best t-shirts out there. These are American-made, owned by a Christian and a patriot. And the material, it's like getting a warm hug from yours truly. One of the better things as well is there's no tags. I hate tags. I know you do as well. I don't know how many times I've cut off a tag and ended up with a hole in my shirt. You never have to worry about that with Stand Up Now apparel. These are the best shirts out there with the greatest messages. Let me give you a few examples. There's a t-shirt out there that says armed with Ephesians 6 on it. I gotta tell you, when I wear this in town, I get a lot of comments and a lot of eyebrow raises. There's other shirts that include pure blood in Hebrew, obviously in reference to the vaccines, and also you can get Church and State merch there as well. We've got our flagship shirt, I Was Born for a Storm, with Church and State right on it. You got to order this shirt. Go to Stand Up Now apparel for t-shirts and hats, all of this great merch with great Christian and patriotic messages.
Remember to use that promo code Church and State.
And we are back. Thank you for staying with us. You're over at churchandstate.media, and we're going to go right back to our guest. But real quick, I do got to plug one of our awesome affiliates. And with everything we're talking about privacy, I'm going to talk about the company that I also work for. I'm going to talk about mark37.com, ghost phones, ghost laptops. I love that I have a ghost phone. I love that I'm using Graphene OS to where these big tech companies, big government that we've been talking about on this episode, I'm private. I'm secure. You know, it's not a silver bullet. We never want to claim it is, but I guarantee you I'm 100 times better than those of you who are carrying an iPhone in your pocket. So go check out mark37.com. Use that promo code Church and State. You're going to get a discount, and you're going to help support us here at Church and State. And one more time, hit the donate button for us. Keep us alive, especially for conversations like this. These are some of the most important things we're dealing with. With that, let's go back to our guest, Dr. Jon Padfield. And we've been talking about some major issues in this country. And it's the government, once again, that typically is that problem, that crisis that has been created. And here we are in this modern era, and my guest laid it out perfectly. You know, he didn't name names on Epstein. I guess I am now. But if we're supposed to be protecting kids, shouldn't we first point the finger at all of these sick individuals? And I don't care where they're at. I don't care if they're the president of the United States or the head of a big company. If they were at Epstein Island and they were engaging in the most egregious behavior against kids, there should be justice.
You think about the words of Jesus himself when some of the apostles were trying to keep the children away from him, like he's too busy, he doesn't have time for them. Our Lord said, no, let them come to me. Jesus cared deeply about children. And it grates on me to see the two injustices. Number one, too many politicians just sitting back, not doing anything. And then at the same time, using children as a human shield to implement their agenda of trying to usher in the surveillance state. It's coming rapidly. There's signs of it all over the place. I generally use the term surveillance infrastructure, but what is the surveillance infrastructure? It's the hardware of the surveillance state. And I talk about that frequently, but it just grates on me when they use children as the excuse. Well, we need this to protect the kids. You don't care about kids. If you did, you wouldn't have let all these other things happen.
No, you're absolutely right. And it frustrates me how few people actually understand their rights and push back even a little bit in the system. And let me give you an example of that. You and I both fly a lot. And when we get to the TSA where they're asking us for our real ID, which I don't have, I use my passport personally. That's one way. Yeah, that's one way of pushing back just a little bit. But they want you to step in front of a camera. You don't have to do that. You can decline that, but the amount of people who don't even ask why they're getting their photo taken is absolutely ridiculous.
They claim that all the images are destroyed within 24 hours, but here's something. I'm a professor. I teach graduate level data analytics. And one of the things that I cover in my introduction to data analytics is data ethics. One of the very first points that I really emphasize to my grad students, once data is surrendered, you lose all control over it. Whatever happens with it from that point forward, you are at the mercy of whoever you gave the data to. They may, I stress the word may, abide by the terms of service under which you gave it to them. But if you give your data, and it doesn't matter if we're talking browsing history, location history, call logs, financial records, whatever data you're talking about, if I give that to a company, best case scenario, they only use it for what's in the agreement, which is probably 100 times more than I realize. But what else can happen? Well, what happens when that company gets bought by another company? All of my terms and conditions are out the window. I am now being bound by the agreement of the bigger company. What happens when a government agency goes to them and says, we want a copy of that? The vast majority of them, here you go. A few will push back and say not without a warrant, but that's the exception, not the rule. What happens when that company suffers a data breach? And data breaches happen every single day. And so once you give up data, it's totally outside of your control. And I'll go back to one example. This is an old example, but it is so illustrative of what can happen. World War II. FDR issues an executive order. Americans of Japanese descent are going to be forcibly rounded up and relocated, kicked out of their homes. They're going to be relocated because they are a danger to the United States. We don't know where their loyalties lie. A lot of people are familiar with the fact that this happened to Americans of Japanese ancestry, in part because of the movie Karate Kid. But it didn't stop at Americans of Japanese ancestry. A smaller number of Americans of German ancestry were rounded up and forcibly relocated, and an even smaller number of Americans of Italian ancestry. We're talking about innocent Americans whose only crime was having ancestors from a country that we are now at war with. How did the military know where to go find all these people? They rounded them up very, very quickly. And there were accusations back in the 1940s that the U.S. Census Bureau helped the military round people up. For 70 years, the Census Bureau denied that. We had nothing to do with that. This is sacred. When you give data to the Census Bureau, we never divulge it for anything other than the data that we publish. We don't share it with any other government agency. They maintained that for 70 years. It was in the early 2010s, some researchers going through the National Archives found the smoking gun. Here's the documentation. You gave this to the Department of War back during World War II. Oh yeah, we forgot about that, kind of like Howard Lutnick. I forgot about that trip to the island. The Census Bureau forgot about that data that they gave to the Department of War to round up American citizens, innocent American citizens. And I just use that as an example to my grad students. Once you give up data, it doesn't matter why you gave it up. Once you give it up, you are at the mercy of whoever you gave that data to. You are trusting them that they're not going to share it or allow it to be stolen.
Again, in agreement. And, to the audience, how many Japanese spies they actually caught by rounding up all of our citizens? That's a big fat zero, ladies and gentlemen, not a single one. So we rounded up all these citizens that are Americans and placed them in internment camps for nothing. And I'm so glad that you brought up World War II, because I was going to actually address two elements of government propaganda and excuses that I'm sure you and I both hear quite a bit. The first one, is one that you'll hear in every single airport in America. If you see something, say something. They're constantly putting that over the loudspeaker. It's like they're encouraging, this Karen system, the nosy neighbor peering out through the shades, like what's going on over there. Americans used to mind their own business. And then the other one, and then I'll turn it back over to you. And I love it when people say this, well, I got nothing to hide, so I got nothing to fear. What say you?
I never thought that I would be quoting Jon Stewart. He was not one of my favorite people, but on occasion he makes some really good points. He was talking about government and government corruption, and his expression was, if you smell something, say something. And I thought, I got to give him credit. That's a good one. The line, and I have heard this so many times, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care who's watching you? I have my own thoughts on that. Number one, it's the exact wrong question. It's not a matter of what am I trying to hide, it's a matter of consent. What do I choose to disclose? And I want you to think about two people. Maybe they're introduced to each other by friends, maybe they meet online, but a 23-year-old woman and a 24-year-old man, they're gonna go meet at a coffee shop. And if the guy comes in and he knows her first, middle, last name, what her dog's name is, where she lives now, where she lived the last 3 times that she moved, names of her parents, her job, what she watched on TV last night, what is her reaction going to be to this guy? You're
Stalker.
A stalker, you're a creep, get away from me, I never want to see you again. Okay, that's kind of the way insurance companies are. They know everything about you. But the whole point is there is mutual disclosure. If I'm meeting somebody brand new, and I'm married, so I'm not in the dating scene, but if you're meeting someone, I share a little bit about me, you share a little bit about you, I share a little bit more. As we get comfortable with each other, over time we build trust, we share more and more. When the government steps in and says, I just pulled your records, I know everything about you, that's a violation. But here's the best answer of all about if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care? And I heard this from a gentleman when I was doing one of my Brushfire of Freedom tour events out west last year. He just simply said, what makes you think you have the right to decide if you're doing anything wrong? You don't. Whether you're doing something wrong or not, that's up to the government to decide. Now, as a Christian, I have a higher standard than the government. I have a book that hasn't changed in 2,000 years, and that book says this is what's right, this is what's wrong. And I'm okay with that. I do my best to follow that. Not saying I'm perfect, but I do my best to follow that book. But those laws aren't changing every time somebody new gets elected. One of the things that we were talking data centers earlier. What is the interest of the state? Because Florida introduced House Bill 945. Representative Danny Alvarez in Florida introduced House Bill 945 in Florida this year. And it basically criminalized having the wrong opinions. He defined a term called an adversary intelligence entity, which includes any individual whose demonstrated actions, views, or opinions are deemed a threat to the interest of the state. Let that sink in for a second. Forget the First Amendment. We're not even talking about you going out and sharing these views. If you hold this view or this opinion that is against the interest of the state, you are an adversary intelligence entity, and their counterterrorism unit is authorized to deal with you. Okay, huge constitutional problems with that. But here's my other question. What are the interests of the state? If we're going to criminalize holding opinions that are counter to the interest of the state, somebody please give me a list. I want to get my mind right. Well, no, I don't. But you know what I mean. Up until about 2 years ago, I could have sworn the interest of the state included reducing our CO2 emissions, because for 20 years, I've been hearing about how we're all going to die on January 2030. The world's going to end. In fact, I have an audio recording of a current member of Congress saying the world's going to end in 2030 because of global warming. Up until about 2 years ago, reducing our carbon footprint was an existential priority. Because if we don't reduce our carbon footprint, we're all going to die in 2030. That's a point of no return. And all of a sudden, we need more data centers. That means we need an extra 200 gigawatts of power generation in the United States. Oh, okay, make it happen. How soon can we get another 200 gigawatts of power? Well, I thought we had to conserve electricity. Oh, not anymore. So global warming's not a threat any longer? Apparently not. And in fact, Bill Gates himself, the king of global warming, Bill Gates, about a year and a half ago, came out and made a statement about, well, temperatures are going to be increasing, but not as much as we originally thought, and it may get a little bit uncomfortable, but we'll deal with it. It's not a problem. Gee, great timing that you decided global warming isn't a problem after 20 years of hearing how it's going to kill everyone. Great that you decided global warming's not an issue right about the same time that Microsoft decided they needed a 4 or 5 gigawatt data center.
Of course, because they are hypocrites. And I got to tell you, I love that you brought your faith into this, because I want to just do a little compare and contrast here. The government who is spying on us, and let's just say governments, but let's just make this worldwide, because governments have been spying on their people really since they started existing. So governments, when they spy on people, what do? They arrest you, they imprison you, some cases kill you. God, who can also see everything that we're doing and everything that we're thinking. Government's not there yet. But God's response to watching everything that we're doing is to send his son to die for our sins. What would you rather live under?
No brainer.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple question, right? We have a God that sent his son to die for our sins. We have a government who watches our sins and puts us in prison over it. Sir, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We're running out of time here, but I've just thoroughly enjoyed this. I want to, number one, push everybody to your website, businessreform.org. Chris is going to show that for the audience. I'll have you pitch that and why people should be following you. But I also want to remind everybody again, August 1st here in Spokane, Washington, 1504 West Grace. That's Family of Faith Church. There's going to be a great event with our guest, Dr. Jon here. He's going to be speaking from 10:30 to noon. Doors open at 10 o'clock. But go there, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a phenomenal event. Jon, please tell everybody why not only should they go to your website, but also come to Spokane and watch this great event.
Well, on my website, I have links to everything. My YouTube channel, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel on YouTube, absolutely free. But I post videos, at least one a week, sometimes two a week. They are well researched. They're not clickbait. I'm not the type of person that's going to make hyperbolic claims just to get people to click. They're very sound, very logical, very well researched. I'm a professor, and I bring that to my YouTube channel. The event that's coming up on August 1st, I'm going to speak for about an hour, and then the last 30 minutes is all Q&A because I love interacting with people. I believe this is probably going to be one of the biggest events that I've done in my entire tour. As I see my website scrolling by, if you could scroll back down just a bit, there's a list of places that I've already spoken, and I've done a lot of public speaking over the years. Nashville, Tennessee, Chattanooga. I was a speaker at the Libertarian National Convention back in May of this year. So I've done a lot of public speaking. I love getting out and meeting people, talking about these types of issues, sharing ideas. I'm going to be talking about a few things people can do to boost their privacy, such as using a graphene phone rather than sticking with a traditional phone. Every now and then people will get after me because I use an iPhone, and I tell them that's one of 5 phones that I use. I have a graphene phone. I have a couple of others. But anyway, I will be talking about some practical privacy tips beyond using a particular phone, beyond the Faraday bags. There's some other things that we get into as well. But I'll be sharing some practical privacy tips and doing a lot of Q&A with the audience.
Well, fantastic. I once again encourage the audience to go to this event, go to the website as well, start following my guest, because this is, I think, one of the most important issues that we're dealing with right now. And if we really do want to make America great again, part of that, I think a big part of that is going back to having some privacy, both digitally and just in person. Dr. Jon, it's been awesome having you on the show. I'm going to have you back. It's been a real fun interview, but thank you for joining us.
I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If you hold on one more minute, post-production, to say our goodbyes, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
But thank you for all your work and for a great episode.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. A great event here locally in Spokane. Dr. Jon, if you go to the website, you're going to be able to see that, hey, he's coming to probably a city near you. So he's going on a whirlwind tour. So regardless of where you're at, find a location where you can hear this. It's such an important issue. And this guest, he certainly knows. He's an expert. He's a professor. Go check him out. Church and State is brought to you in part by Colonial Life Spokane Independent Agents, Finders Insurance, and Mark37.com. I'm Caleb Collier. I was born for a storm.
Welcome to the fire.
This is Caleb Collier with Church and State Media. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not sleeping on MyPillow, do you even patriot? I got to tell you, this is the most wonderful stuff from a man who's given it all for your freedoms. Whether it be the pillow, the sheets, or the slippers, I absolutely adore MyPillow. MyPillow has the greatest products around. I know when I want to shuffle around in my bathrobe and slippers and yell at the neighbors, of course I'm buying from MyPillow. I need you to head on over to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, because every single time that you purchase any of these products using the promo code Church and State, you ensure that we keep our message out on the air.
I thank everybody for your support in using promo code Church and State. You guys go to mypillow.com/Church and State too, and then you get your own little platform right there, everybody.
Hey, this is Caleb Collier with the Church and State Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I want all of you to go to Galileo.com. You need to stay connected no matter what comes our way. Whether it's government intrusion or a meteor falling from the sky, Galileo has you connected. As a Marine veteran, I can tell you that communications is essential. Galileo has you connected. Whether it's worldwide coverage, uncensored content, or real-time alerts, Galileo is going to make sure that you're connected with your friends, family, and neighbors. Just head on over to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, and hit Galileo.com. Make sure to ask them for a free bivvy stick, and make sure to use that promo code Church and State. Hey, this is Caleb Collier, and I know you're excited for the Church and State podcast. Now, as a Christian patriot, I love precious metals, whether it's gold, silver, palladium, and of course, lead. And this is why I want you to go over to Ponderay Ballistics, don't ask me how to spell it, for all of your ammunition needs. Remember, that's PENDOREILLE ballistics.com for all of your ammunition needs. I want you to head on over to churchandstate.media/shop, go to Ponderay Ballistics, and have a shooting good time.